In the late 8th century, long sails appeared on the seas from the north, heralding a time of great storms. It was the Vikings, warriors, traders, and pirates who spread terror across Europe. With their longships, they could cross oceans, travel up rivers, and land unexpectedly in rich lands. Nowhere was safe. From the monastery of Lindisfarne in England to the prosperous cities of France and Spain. They even penetrated deep into the Mediterranean, shocking the entire Christian world. But the Vikings were not just raiders. They were also brave explorers and shrewd traders. From Dublin in Ireland to Novgorod in Russia, they left a lasting mark. The Vikings brought with them culture, beliefs, and the ambition to expand into new lands. Behind their expeditions was a complex society where war, power, and mythology intertwined. The Vikings believed that death in battle was the path to Valhalla, the place of eternal glory. This belief made them fearless of swords and spears. In the 9th and 10th centuries, their raids reached their peak. European kingdoms were forced to pay huge ransoms in gold and silver in exchange for peace. But wealth was not enough to stop the Vikings. They founded powerful dynasties, such as the Kingdom of Dublin and the Danelaw in England. In the east, the Vikings followed the vast rivers into Russia. They controlled the vital trade routes connecting the Baltic with Byzantium. The Varangians, descendants of the Vikings, became the loyal bodyguards of the Byzantine emperors. However, the Viking era could not last forever. European kingdoms grew stronger, learning to fight back against the invaders from the north. Strong fortresses and disciplined armies gradually weakened the Viking power. Gradually, from conquerors to settlers, they became integrated into medieval society. Yet the Viking legacy remained. Legends of Odin, Thor, and the immortal warriors lived on in the minds of posterity. Longships, marriages, and trade left a deep mark. The Vikings, the fury of the North, had carved their place in human history. By the mid-9th century, Viking fleets were strong enough not only to plunder, but also to besiege Europe's largest cities for ransom. They were no longer lightning raiders. They now carried out methodical sieges, prepared for a protracted conflict. Despite being outnumbered, the defenders of Paris under the leadership of Count Odo prepared for a fierce defense. But faced with prolonged devastation, King Charles made a decision that would shape Europe's response for years to come. He chose to pay a ransom, a huge tribute of silver called the Danegeld, to buy the city's peace. For the Viking leaders, the victory proved one thing: the kingdoms of Europe were rich but weak and willing to pay for peace. The news that Paris had been conquered not by force, but by gold and silver, spread fear and a dangerous idea throughout Europe. This gave rise to an even bigger idea. Why take their silver when we can take their land? By 865, that idea had come to fruition. A coalition of Scandinavian warriors, known as the Great Heathen Army, had assembled. Their goal was no longer to plunder and leave, but to conquer and occupy. They landed in East Anglia, but did not attack immediately. They established a base, fortified their position, and forced the kingdom to provide them with horses. The Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, already divided, now faced an existential threat. The following spring, the army moved north, targeting Northumbria. Under the strategic command of Ivar the Boneless, they aimed for the kingdom's capital, York. Northumbria was in the midst of a civil war, and the Vikings took advantage of the chaos. They took York by surprise. The Northumbrian defenders, though fighting bravely, were overwhelmed. York fell in late 866. Northumbria, the once powerful Anglo-Saxon kingdom, was subdued. News of York's fall was devastating. For the first time, the Vikings were not just raiding, but also taking land and staying. After consolidating their position at York, the Great Heathen Army moved south, conquering East Anglia in 869, and then subduing Mercia. By 871, 3 of the 4 Anglo-Saxon kingdoms had fallen. Only one remained, Wessex, under the leadership of a young king named Alfred. Alfred didn't just fight, he built. He developed a system of fortified towns called burhs, creating a network of defenses in depth to counter Viking maneuvers. The final confrontation took place at Edington. Alfred's army used shield wall tactics effectively, and after hours of fighting, the Danish walls could no longer hold. Guthrum was defeated, besieged in his fortress, and forced to accept peace terms. Under the Treaty of Wedmore, Guthrum was forced to convert to Christianity. This victory led to the creation of the Danelaw, a region in England where Danish law was applied, and ensured the survival of the English kingdom. For Ragnar and many other warriors, the conquest was over. They were now settlers, farmers in a new land, but Viking blood still flowed in their veins. Even as the Danelaw was established, major raids continued elsewhere. In 885, an unprecedented Viking fleet besieged Paris, intent on seizing the riches of the Frankish kingdom. But Paris was prepared. Under the leadership of Count Odo, the city was ready for a fierce defense. The Vikings used elaborate siege tactics, including siege towers, battering rams, and ladders, in a concerted effort to break through the lines. The defenders of Paris fought back fiercely, using every advantage of their fortifications to repel successive attacks. Ultimately, the siege ended not in a military victory, but in ransom. Emperor Charles the Fat paid a huge Danegeld, demonstrating the weakness of the central authority. Meanwhile, in the east, the Swedish Vikings, known as the Rus, took a different route. They used the vast river systems for trade and plunder, penetrating deep into what would become Russia. Their path eventually led them to the richest city in the world, Constantinople. But here they encountered a formidable opponent. During the attack in 941, the Byzantine Greek firepower once again proved to be the decisive weapon, burning the Rus fleet and repelling the invasion. But the relationship was not all about war. Many Vikings chose to serve the Byzantine emperor, forming the Varangian Guard, the emperor's elite and loyal bodyguard. Serving in the guard was a path to extraordinary wealth and fame, so much so that future kings such as Harald Hardrada of Norway were members. Not all Vikings went south to plunder. Others sailed west across the North Atlantic, settling in Iceland and Greenland, and then to the edge of the known world. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson landed in a new land, which he called Vinland. They became the first Europeans to reach North America. They attempted to establish a settlement, hoping for a new life, but the land was not uninhabited. It was home to a native people, whom the Norse called Skraelings. Initial encounters may have been peaceful trade, but cultural differences and fear quickly led to conflict. An incident involving a bull shattered the fragile trust. The Skraelings returned in overwhelming numbers. They had the advantage of numbers and knowledge of the terrain. Although the Norse had superior weapons and armor, they were outnumbered. In that moment of desperation, the bravery of a woman, Freydis Eriksdottir, is said to have saved the day, making the attackers hesitate. Ultimately, the Norse decided to abandon their efforts to settle Vinland. They realized that with their small numbers, they could not survive the inevitable attacks of the natives. Despite their defeat at Vinland, the Viking spirit of exploration expanded Europe's view of the world. Tales of new lands inspired generations of traders and explorers. In Europe, kingdoms learned how to deal with the fury of the North. Strong fortresses, defensive systems, and professional armies gradually stopped the invasions. Kings centralized power and united in their fight against foreign invaders. Gradually, the mobility and surprise that had been the Vikings' main weapons lost their effectiveness. The 11th century saw the last expeditions, but they were no longer as powerful as before. In 1066, Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king, fell at Stamford Bridge. It was the end of the Viking Age, an era that had lasted nearly 3 centuries. But their influence did not vanish with the long sails. They left their mark on the political map of Europe, from England to Russia. In England, the existence of the Danelaw shaped culture, language, and law. In Ireland, the Vikings founded the city of Dublin, a major trading center of the Middle Ages. In the East, the Rus chieftains laid the foundations for the later Russian principalities. In Byzantium, the Varangian Guard became a symbol of Northern European loyalty and strength. Their legacy still resonates today, not only through tales of brutality, but also through their role as explorers, traders, and nation builders.